All right, I guess we can start then. Welcome everyone to the sixth Talk in the College Talk series hosted by Inflow Communications. Today we have with us Arpit from Harvard, and he will be sharing with us his college application journey. Hi Arpit, and we're glad to have you. The College Talk series is a set of Zoom webinars where we hope to improve the exposure to and knowledge of the college search and application process among high school students. Before I start, I would like to request all of you to keep your microphones muted and videos off throughout the session. Please refrain from annotating on the screen. And lastly, post all your questions through the chat. They will be posed to our speaker in the latter part of the talk. Thank you for joining us, and Arpit, you can now take over.
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you to Inflow Communications for asking me to host this talk. I think it's really exciting that I get to share my college application journey with all of you. And yeah, I'm really please ask any questions that you have, and even after the presentation, I'll probably try to give my email so you can email me with anything you need. And hopefully I'll be able to help you. Anyways, so I am currently a freshman at Harvard University, and I'm on campus. I graduated from Greenwood High International School in Bangalore this year. And yeah, so so my first slide is why Harvard. As we all have probably seen, Harvard has been exaggerated a lot by the media and pop culture, whatever. But in my opinion, it's not. It's very different from what the opinion is. It's not people, rich people milling around being super pretentious and snobby, even though I feel like that's the impression that a lot of people have. And I feel like me as well, before I came here, I had the impression that everyone at Harvard would be super smart or super pretentious or super stuck up about what they've done in the past. But it's not been like that. And I feel like the atmosphere, which I've heard described as an atmosphere full of compassionate ambition, is really what makes the school great. Because it feels like everyone is super passionate about what they're doing, and not just for the sake of doing it, but also to help the world, help society. And being amongst people like that, it makes it will obviously make you insecure. It makes me insecure quite a bit, but it's definitely a great way to learn. In addition, I think Harvard just has a lot of money, and so it can throw that money at you to get any projects that you want done. For example, if you want to research, they have a lot of grants and funding for that. If you want to travel, they have a program that literally just lets you travel around the world and things like that. In addition, they have, cool classes and clubs like the Institute of Politics and the International Relations Council that definitely attracted me to the school. But despite all this, I do have to admit that I did not anticipate applying to Harvard during my application season. I almost just applied on a whim, and I hadn't seriously given this question, why Harvard, any thought. Because, I applied because I thought I wouldn't get in, I just wanted to try it out. But now that I'm actually here, I feel like there are many reasons outside of the name Harvard, which people often cite as a reason they want to go there, that you would actually want to apply. In addition, just like me, where I didn't think I'd go in, I feel like anyone, if they structure their application right, if they talk about, why they're passionate about what they're passionate about, they have a solid chance of getting in. Anyways, so my journey is honestly fairly straightforward, especially in the high school years. But from before that, I was born in the US and I moved to India in first grade. And I moved to, for all of you who know, the IGCSE curriculum in 8th grade, and spent my 8th, 9th, and 10th doing IG, and 11th and 12th doing IB in Greenwood High International School in Bangalore. So I think throughout that time, I've definitely been influenced by everything around me, my classes, my teachers, my peers. And I feel like all of them really helped me become who I was, and also shaped my college application process. So yeah, that's basically, so I've tried throughout high school to be to find what I'm passionate about and to excel at what I try to do. And I feel like that's really helped me throughout both my high school career and my college application process. And even now that I'm in college, just finding my passions in high school, or at least trying to find them out, have really helped me. Anyway, so moving on to my stats, I've divided this into a boring stats and a less boring stats column. The boring stats are the ones that everyone has. It's the SAT, then I took 3 subject stats, and I would not recommend taking 3 subject sets unless you have a very good reason to take them. I took them because a program I was applying to at a different university required 3 subject sets. Otherwise, I genuinely would not have taken them. So please do not waste your time taking more standardized tests than you need. Including the SAT, I took it in one sitting and got a 1560. And overall, I feel like people usually overhype the importance of standardized tests. People will take the SAT 3, 4, 5 times without like significant increases in score every time, just because they think like those 10 or 20 points will give them an edge. I genuinely believe, and I think college reps have said this in my school as well, that taking the SAT this many times is not really beneficial for anyone, because they'd rather you'd be doing something that you enjoy, something that you're passionate about, and something that you can also include in your application, which will count a lot more than the SAT. And then again, you see my IGCSE and IB grades. I took, a bunch of subjects. I think the only interesting comment here is that in IB, I tried taking, instead of the usual 6 subjects, I tried taking a 7th subject, simply because I was really passionate about the topic, which was further mathematics. And I really wanted to sort of explore it more. So that's one thing, that's probably the most interesting thing out of all this left column of stats. And it's interesting simply because it's how I try to demonstrate my passion to colleges, or at least it's one way in which I try to demonstrate my passion. I think that you can do this through many ways. It doesn't have to be taking an extra class, but that's definitely one thing I did. Anyways, now for people interested in STEM, it's the right column that is much more interesting, because these are the AMC, AIME, and if you qualify, the USAMO series of competitions. I didn't qualify. So the idea here is that these are fairly intense math competitions where you have to solve, so in the AMC case, you have to solve 25 questions in, I think, 1 hour and 15 minutes. And in the AIME case, you have to solve 15 questions in 3 hours. And obviously that doesn't seem like a lot, but it's very intense. And I think, and like a lot of people spend almost their entire high school career dedicated to this type of math, which is competition math. You don't have to do that. But in my opinion, if you're a science person and you're getting an 800 on your SAT math, you're getting an 800 on your math too. There's no other way by taking the SATs that you're going to differentiate yourself within mathematics. So taking the AMC and the AIME are an excellent way to do that. If your school doesn't offer it, you can always search it up or ask your school to try offering it. And if you're an Indian citizen, then you can also take the RMO, which is sort of the Indian version of these competitions, although you can still take the AMC and AIME. And these competitions are so important for STEM that the application to, for example, Caltech and MIT explicitly ask for your AMC scores. So I think that if you're interested in math, these are the set of exams. Of course, if you're not interested in competition math, don't take them. But if you're even vaguely interested in this and you think it might be cool, then I definitely recommend taking these exams. Anyways, so yeah, those were my stats overall. And now moving on to my extracurriculars and painting a picture. What does that mean? Well, as you can see, I've drawn random lines on this presentation for some reason. And the reason is that I've tried to connect all the activities on the left to interests that I have on the right. And those could have been over here, I'm interested, at least I feel that I'm interested in science and sort of a politics debate sort of melange of that. And so I feel throughout my application, I tried to connect my activities, my essays to this combination or to these two things. So as you can see on the left-hand side is sort of the activities in the order that I put it on the Common App. Obviously, you can't put 12 activities, but like activity 11 and 12 were ones that I added in the extra information. And aside from maybe like swimming, other volunteering, guitar, and hackathon should go into science, I put, I connected everything to either my interest in science, like my overarching interest in all things scientific, or my interest in public speaking or debate or politics. And I feel like doing that, as I'll probably tell you guys later, doing that really helped colleges see who I was as a person. It helped them realize that I was, interested in these two things. And wait, oops, my bad. It helped them realize that I was interested in these two things and definitely allowed me to express my interests and myself better. And I think helped me a lot in my application process. So I'll briefly go through all of these. If you guys have any questions about these activities, please ask them at the end of the presentation. I'd love to elaborate more on what I did and how you could do similar things, because I feel like with enough initiative, like anyone can basically do anything that I've done. Anyways, so my first was I conducted some research in, this was probably the activity that if anything got me in, this activity got me in. Because I spent 6 weeks at a university in the US doing research in biophysics. Now, what is biophysics? I still have no idea. Actually, well, I didn't have any idea when I started. And I think that's what intrigued me about it, because I wanted to learn about the concepts and about the topics. And I wanted to learn something I'd never known before, and at the same time, conduct research in it. So what I did was I spent 6 weeks, I worked with a grad student and the professor, and I actually was able to learn quite a bit, like much more than I expected. And was able to, and it allowed me to kind of conduct research. And then I got a rec letter from that professor, which I think at least helped me a lot in my college applications. Now, MUN in debate, that's pretty self-explanatory. I was part of my school's MUN team where we both competed in high school MUNs, and towards the middle of 12th grade, we hosted our own, both of which were amazing experiences. And again, this connects to sort of my other interest. So whereas my research connects to my love for science, which is probably what I'll major in, my MUN and debate interests connect to politics, which is forming the bulk of my extracurriculars now, where I'm part of sort of a few debate unions, and then the MUN team at Harvard and things like that. And then I also did like college debate with a few of my friends, simply because we saw that college debates were happening and we wanted to do them and we were interested. Anyway, so then I also was in student council, where we tried to conduct events in school, such as, if you're in Bangalore, hopefully you'll know our School Fest Ignite, which ended up being a pretty big thing, and which I tried to highlight in my application as an example of, us coming together and actually leading a giant event, something that I hadn't expected to happen, but actually happened. And then I did robotics, which is again pretty self-explanatory. I did something called the CFRCE, which is the Center for Fundamental Research and Creative Education, where I basically learned some linear algebra and multivariable calculus and quantum physics, simply because I was interested in that. And I feel like if I'd continued, I could have done some research. But regardless, the concepts I learned helped me both in my college applications and in activity one, my research in biophysics. Because without sort of the framework of multivariable calculus, you cannot, it would have been hard for me to do my research. And then again, swimming is self-explanatory. Awesome Math was this math camp that I went to after 9th grade. And at Awesome Math, it was basically a competition math prep camp. So for example, a lot of people who are interested in the Aime and AMC series of exams. And I kind of was, but not that much. It was just a great experience overall. It introduced me to a lot of new math. And again, it was a great thing to put on my application to show colleges that I was interested in science, to show them like what I had been doing since 9th grade in order to, express my passions. And then there was science popularization, where I tried to host like talks, bringing actual real world scientists into, a public setting in order for them to explain what they've done and hopefully inspire people to be interested, which aligned with kind of both of my interests because, I love speaking, as you can probably hear, and you're probably annoyed at, and I love science. And then, yeah, I did more volunteering. I did guitar. I did writing competitions, which was a politics-based one. And I did hackathons. So I think all of these, like individually, I've definitely tried to put an effort. But I think where they really stand out is when they're all together. And when together they paint a picture and show colleges that I was interested in these two very broad themes and how those have sort of defined my educational career. Anyways, so yeah, now on to sort of structuring my essays and looking at those. So despite everything I've said, with extracurriculars and all of that, I feel like structuring your essays are arguably the most important part of your application because they also help you paint a picture of yourself, and they're the most important tool for painting a picture of yourself. Your essays, as you might have heard in the past, are in your voice, and that idea is incredibly powerful because it's basically when admissions officers are doing their deliberations in committee and when they're trying to figure out who to admit and who to not admit. Your essays are basically you talking directly to the admissions officers. And that can tell them way more than any of your stats can, than any of your extracurriculars can, because it's basically your pitch for yourself. Which is why the most important thing in your essays is to be yourself. You should not try to put on like a fake persona or like say that you're interested in something that sounds cool, but you're not interested in. Like me, for example, I was very interested in reading fantasy writing. So literally my Common App essay was about fantasy writing. And I tried to connect it to my love for science as well, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, so I didn't try to be all fancy and try to embellish it and say that I was super interested in something I wasn't, because colleges would like it. Because I don't think that's what admissions officers want. At least I didn't think so. And I feel like writing an essay about something that I truly enjoyed and truly loved doing, which was just reading fantasy books, made the essay just like as good as it could have been. And then, yeah, also try to be creative, especially in your topics, I say, because like, for example, in my opinion, I spent almost 2 hours trying to come up with just the topic for my Common App essay. I was literally just walking around the table at home, dreaming of topics, writing them down until I came up with a good one. Because I felt like having like a creative topic, which was where I combined my love for fantasy with my love for science and showed how they're basically the same, was very important. But obviously don't stress if you can't be. Again, more than being creative, you have to be yourself, because that's what'll help you the most, like more than absolutely anything else. Because when you are yourself, you basically sorry. When you are yourself, you're basically, yeah, that's it. Like that's how you're supposed to be all the time in your essays. And then you're also supposed to find a writing process that works for you. So for me, my writing process was a little bit too hinged on the last minute panic. I wrote a lot of my essays a little bit too late in the process. For example, I started writing my essays for some colleges just like 3 days before the deadline, which wasn't great. But in hindsight, don't do that. But in hindsight, I feel like that really pushed me to be myself, and it prevented me from overly embellishing my essays. To give an example, when I was applying to Princeton, which was my early action, I spent maybe like a month and a half on like one or like 3 Princeton essays. And because of that, I wrote them. Then I asked my friends for feedback. Then I wrote them again. Then I asked for feedback, I wrote them again. And eventually the essays just became jumbled messes, like jumbled garbage. Because like I kept rewriting them, that I lost my original idea. And they just became all polished, no substance. And so I feel like that, like you should start writing your essays early. And when you do that, make sure that this doesn't happen to you. Make sure that your writing process actually, works for you. Make sure that it lets you be yourself, and make sure that it lets you show colleges exactly exactly who you are and what you're passionate about. Like my Princeton essay ended up being about some, weird philosophical problem, even though I'm not like, I like philosophy, but I'm not a philosophy guy. So talking about that was, I think, my attempt to impress the admissions officers with my deep knowledge. But what I think happened is it ended up very tacky and they didn't like it. And in contrast, my Harvard essay, which was something I wrote, also like I also took a good amount of time to write my Harvard essay, but it wasn't as embellished and polished. Like it was polished in terms of the writing style, but it wasn't overly polished where it lost all substance. In the essay, I kind of talked about my research internship at Caltech, and I talked about how I had never explored the topic before and what emotions that brought out in me, what like the type of joy that exploring something that I'd never seen before brought out. And that was much more real. It was much more me than just arguing on and on for like 1,000 words about some random philosophical concept. And I feel like that, that to a large extent explains why I did so much better with the Harvard essay than with the Princeton essay. Simply because, I overly analyzed the latter, and that genuinely, ruined the substance. And speaking of overly polished, you should definitely ask for feedback. Like that's one thing that I continually did. I used to call my friends, I used to ask them for feedback. I used to give it sometimes reluctantly because I called them way too often. And they, yeah, it was just like a process where I knew that my essay wasn't perfect. So every time I asked for feedback, it was just it helped me make it a little bit better. But of course, like the moral of the story is too much of a good thing is a bad thing as well. Because as I said with my Princeton essay, I asked for way too much feedback. I rewrote it way too many times. And eventually the main ideas just got lost. So, don't do that. Don't like embellish your essays too much. Ask for feedback for maybe like one or two people max, unless you're really sure that when you ask for feedback, you won't be sort of that when you ask for feedback, you kind of won't be, yeah, it won't screw you over. And that's why I've written, make sure the essay is still yours, because that again is the most important part of writing essays. And here's sort of an excerpt from my essays, my Common App essay, which is about fantasy writing. As you can see, I did try to embellish it, but the core of it is exactly who I am. It's me trying to look at the world that fantasy writers built and try to dissect that world and finding joy from doing that. For example, the line, "It obeys a fundamental logic that I am compelled to figure out," was probably one of the most striking in my essay, simply because that's exactly what I do when I try reading books. I try to understand how their world works, and I try to understand what the author has done and how the author has structured everything. In addition, that line is what connects my love for fantasy to my love for science. And that is also basically what has driven like the main thesis of my essay, or like the main point I was trying to drive home, how all my passions in this sphere are connected together. And again, there's also like the usual embellishment where I said raise stunning cities, everlasting empires, or even entire universes. This is just like, this you can get either through, feedback from your teachers or your college counselor, because I feel like they'll give you like they'll give you good examples, and they'll be able to help you with improving the flair of your writing. Like for me especially, like I think without like feedback, it would have been a lot blander, my essay. So you can definitely ask for feedback there. But again, if at any point in this writing process, if after doing any of the steps that I just mentioned, you feel like your essay is bland, or not bland, if you feel like your essay is not what you've written, then stop. and start rewriting it, or like get it back to one that you've written. A good yardstick is that think about what if like one of your best friends picked up the essay off the street. Would they be able to tell that it's your essay? If they can't, then you're probably straying too far from your voice and you're probably not being yourself enough. Anyways, though, I don't want to like go on and on and on about essays, but if you guys have any questions, then again, please ask them. And moving on to why I think I stood out. And again, like I'm not in the admissions officer's mind. I haven't read my admissions file, so I don't know why I stood out. But what I think is that I demonstrated my passion, or if you've been reading a bunch of websites that mention spike, I demonstrated my spike. And though my spike being like my love for science and my, all my work in science. So what I did as I told you earlier, was I painted a picture of myself using my stats, my extracurriculars, and my essays. My stats through, for example, my math competitions, because I got like relatively decent scores on the competitions compared to what I had expected at least. And I think that sort of also helped me form a picture of myself. And then my extracurriculars, as I've told you guys, like I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 science-based extracurriculars, and 1, 2, 3, 4 at least like politics ones. And so I feel like having that much interest that I've been demonstrating since 9th grade, again, helps showcase my spike, especially in the sciences. And then my essays, where I talked about, the fundamental logic that I was compelled to figure out both in fantasy worlds and the real world. And I think, through those 3 methods, as well as my interview and things like that for the colleges that had interviews, I was able to show colleges exactly why I loved what I loved and why, yeah. And in addition, because I loved what I did, I was able to do, reasonably well in all the activities I participated in. For example, if I absolutely hated doing science, but I had done it anyways, then, or like research specifically, then I would not have done well at all. But because I liked doing research at all, I literally put in like 10-hour days in the lab during my summer vacation, something that I did not expect myself to do. But I did, not for the college application process, but because the topic was just so interesting. And I feel like, when something is extremely interesting to you, you will put in like 10-hour days, 11-hour days, and you will make sure that you do it as well as possible. If you're only doing something because you want to put it in your college application, you're not going to be able to do well at it, because you will just be unmotivated. You just won't be good at the activity. And I think that'll hurt you, because admissions officers can usually sense that, given that they've read hundreds of applications in the past, and they usually don't like that. And similar to that, like I feel like I aligned with what colleges were looking for, because what I read online, what I talked to people about, is colleges are looking for, interesting people with a joie de vivre, which basically means that people who kind of, have like a spark who love like exactly what they're doing, because like people, like if you're doing science, then you're absolutely obsessed with it or you love it. If you're doing music, then you really like that. If you're doing math, then you're super into that. And I think, and also just having like an interesting personality that you can showcase in your essays. And in my opinion, everyone has an interesting personality, but some people just get bogged down when writing their essays by these ideas that they have to be what colleges want. But that is the exact opposite of what, in my opinion, colleges actually want. Because again, if you try to be the formulaic college applicant, then you will 100% not be the interesting college applicant. And therefore, if you're going to take one thing away, make sure that you portray yourself, as you are, with everything that's interesting about you. Don't try to be like, don't try to be something that you're not, because that'll really, that will probably mess up your application process, because colleges will see through that and they won't want to admit you. But if you showcase who you truly are, then they'll be like, wow, that person looks amazing. I'd really want to meet him. I'd really want to, or her, I'd really want to talk to them. Things like that. One yardstick I've heard that admissions officers use is like, would they want to, how interesting would a conversation be if they had with you? Or like, would you be a good member of the campus community? Would you be a good roommate? Things like that. And they can only see that human element of you if you put it in your application, if you make it interesting, if you show them that you're passionate about what you do. And I think that I was able to do that with my application, at least to a large extent, which is why I stood out to most of the colleges that I applied to. And with that, I think I have, I've been boring you for half an hour with my incessant droning on. So do you guys have any questions about anything in the presentation?
Okay, great. So we have a few questions already coming in. So the first one would be, could you elaborate on how you got a research opportunity with the professor and what some of the prerequisites for that would be?
Mm-hmm. So I think getting a research opportunity is sort of like, is sort of, for lack of a better term, like a crapshoot, because it's hard often to find like a specific, like if you want to work with like a specific professor, it's often hard to like be able to work with them. But if you reach out enough, if you, for example, know people in some industry that you like, that you want to work with, then you can reach out to them. If you also like cold emailing works, like I've cold emailed professors and had like good conversations with them about their research. And after cold emailing and that conversation, it becomes much easier to ask for a research opportunity. So cold emailing people to ask for research opportunities doesn't work, but cold emailing people to talk about their research works. And then that sort of leads you into a potential research opportunity. And if you cold email enough people, there's a good chance that if you're qualified, you'll be able to get a research opportunity. But again, like the easiest way is to reach out to people that you know, or like people that you're somehow connected to, because you avoid like the potential to be like rejected from everyone you email. In addition, like there are some amazing research programs that are out there in science, math. Just literally search up like research summer programs and you'll be able to find a bunch of them. And most of them connect you with like amazing professors that can really help you and can really mentor you. And yeah, and the prerequisites for research, well, it obviously depends on the field you're in. For me, it was mostly like the math that I learned was a decent amount beyond like the level, because of CFRC, was a decent amount beyond the level of high school math. And I think without that mathematical maturity, I wouldn't have been able to effectively do the research. I wouldn't have been able to contribute as much as I did. But obviously, it completely depends on your field. If you're doing like, if you want to do like history research, then you obviously don't need to know linear algebra. And so I can't really say what the prerequisites are, but what I had was a good knowledge of computational linear algebra and multivariable calculus, which is what helped me. But if you're looking for one specific prerequisite, this is not something that you can learn in a class, but it's just the willingness to chase new ideas. That'll help you in research in general, and it'll help you in anything academic that you're doing. So if you have the willingness to, like I had never touched any of the concepts I'd learned before, and it was really grueling to try and learn them. But I feel like I was just so enthralled by the topic and I was so willing to learn the new ideas that's what helped me excel in the research.
All right, great. Okay, so another question regarding your research would be, did you publish your own research paper?
Okay, so I did not publish a research paper because I don't think, like, I collaborated with a bunch of people on the research. So I couldn't have really published a research paper without having to cite them. And B, I feel like the research I did was good, but the topic I was trying to tackle was a little bit too complicated to be publishable after 6 weeks of work. And after 6 weeks of work, my summer was over and it was hard to continue at the same sort of rate with my topic. So yeah, I wasn't able to publish a research paper. But what I did was I turned the research work I did into a research abstract, and I sent that abstract to almost every college I applied to. So an abstract is essentially what you'd see at like the start of a research paper, but I made mine slightly longer than what's usually there because that was the only thing I was sending. So I tried to summarize my findings and my methodology. And I definitely feel like that explanation of exactly what I did helped a lot. Plus, like I got a recommendation from the PI, like the principal investigator in my lab, the professor I was working with. And so that also helped. So you don't have to publish a research paper, in my opinion. You just have to do like good, interesting research that shows that you're interested in science.
All right, so the next question asks if you've done a foreign language, and in a more general sense, if an applicant has a love for another language, to what extent is it recognized?
I mean, so I've studied French in high school, but I haven't done too much French outside of high school. And like, so I didn't really include like my French speaking ability in my application. But if you have like an immense love for a foreign language, that's absolutely amazing. I know people whose whose main thing is like linguistics or like language at Harvard, and they're super cool, they're super smart, everything. And it's awesome. If you have a love for a foreign language, that's amazing. But it will only be recognized if you do cool things with your love for the foreign language. Maybe, or if you write about it well. So maybe if you participate in Olympiads for the language, or I don't know, if you've written essays, if you've written things in that language and that are interesting and cool, then that'll definitely be recognized by colleges. But if you just, state that you have a love for a foreign language and don't really elaborate on it in like either essays or extracurriculars or something, then they won't care as much about it. But yeah, it's absolutely amazing if you love languages and if you love foreign languages.
Okay, so next question would be about your college list. It says, which colleges did you apply to? How did you prepare a college list? And which colleges did you get into?
Okay, so I applied to I think like 20 colleges, which I do not recommend. Like, do not do that. I messed up big time in my application process by doing that. And I would have had a lot less stress for like 3 months of my life if I did not. But I think the main ones that I really wanted to get into were, I'll tell you like maybe 7 or 8 of them. I applied to Princeton, Harvard, Yale, the University of Pennsylvania, UChicago, the California Institute of Technology, Brown, where else? Then Boston University, where I applied for the full scholarship, Harvey Mudd College, and Northwestern, and well, a few others. And I got into everything except for Princeton, where I was rejected. And then I was waitlisted at UPenn, Yale, and UChicago. But I think I got into the other 16. But like, again, do not apply to so many colleges, because I don't know, because I applied to these many colleges, I think I wasn't able to spend as much time on my essays for like the ones I did apply to. And that messed up like those applications. And in addition, it's just too much stress to deal with. Like, I don't think killing yourself by applying to these many colleges is a good idea. Also, when creating your college list, one thing I'd recommend against is something called shotgunning. So shotgunning is basically when people apply to like a bunch of top schools. They literally take the top 20 on a college ranking list and they'll apply to those schools and maybe like one safety. That is like a terrible idea, because like you might not, like the school you get into might not be a school that you like, because every school in the top 20 schools is very different. And so yeah, like you'll like some of them and you'll hate some of the others. So please don't shotgun for that reason. If you shotgun, then you will end up applying to way too many colleges, and like maybe even more than I did, and I did way too many already. and that's not a great thing as well. And C, your chance of like, if you spend like way too little time on your applications because you're shotgunning, then you're just decreasing the chances that you're getting into any of your colleges. Like it's very possible that you get into like one of the top 20 schools if you sit down, apply properly, and write like good essays. But if you shotgun, then that'll not work. And for my college list, so when I was making it, so originally I made a college list of around 13 schools, which is what I think the optimal number is. Even if you want to apply to less, that's good, but don't apply to more than 13. And the factors that I considered there, the main factor that I considered was sort of the intangible fit factor, which was basically when I talked to people who go to the school, alumni of the school, and just did research online and looked at testimonials about what the atmosphere of the school was like. You know, I wanted to figure out how people were there, how, you know, everything was there, how the vibe was. And I feel like that was something that was the most important to me. And of course, there were a few clubs that I really wanted. For example, like a Mun club or a debate club. Like one of the two was super important to me. And then I wanted there to be a strong research program, especially in like physics and math. I wanted, you know, classes, like interesting classes that I could take for, and yeah, I feel like, and of course, this doesn't really matter with physics and math, but if I had a major that was more niche and that some colleges didn't offer, then having a college that offered that major would definitely be something high on my list. So yeah, I think I looked at essentially the fit factor, and I made sure that the colleges had like elements of everything I wanted.
All right. So the next question would be, how did you prepare for your SAT, and any books or materials that you would recommend?
Yes. So how did I prepare for my SAT? I took the PSAT in 9th grade and in 11th grade. I took my SAT in 11th grade too. So I think for the PSAT, I prepared using solely Khan Academy because I think that's an absolutely amazing resource and that people underutilize. Because Khan Academy has like amazing practice questions, they'll help you build on like your specific weaknesses in the SAT, which I think is extremely useful. And yeah, just all that is awesome. And so Khan Academy for sure. And then when I started preparing for the SAT, the main book that I used is called The Black Book. It's an absolutely amazing SAT guide. I cannot recommend it enough. Like I've used it, I've given it to my friends who've also loved it. And in my opinion, that's the best SAT guidebook out there. Again, it's called The Black Book. And yeah, there they really help you sort of dive into all the concepts, whether it be in like for me, I needed more help in the writing and reading sections and in the math section. So especially for reading and writing, that book was really good. And it helped me sort of hone my, you know, reading the passages of that book, which taught you how to approach writing passages, how to approach reading, really helped me. And in addition, the practice questions or at least the way that they structure their practice tests is really nice. And yeah, so overall, if you're going to use like one resource, use that book. And if you're going to use two, which I did, use that book and Khan Academy. Honestly, I feel like together they are an absolutely amazing way to prepare for the SAT. And so the way I prepared was I did Khan Academy, and then the summer before 11th grade, I spent quite a bit of time preparing for the SAT. I started at maybe the beginning of the summer, and I did practice tests. I read through the books. I just did practice problems on Khan Academy. And slowly, I tried to get the score I wanted to get on various practice tests until I was happy with what I got. And then eventually October came and I took the SAT and PSAT.
All right, so I think the next question is, again, going back to your research. It says, how did you talk to the professors, and what conversations did you have to build relations with them? And also, how did you present your research paper to colleges?
Okay, so the types of conversations you have are, well, they're a little bit varied. So for example, let me give a conversation with like a Princeton professor that I had. So I emailed him, I said that I was extremely interested in his work. I mentioned a few papers of his that I found extremely interesting and why I found them interesting. And I talked about how, my background aligns quite well with what he's done. And so then I told him that I was just very interested in learning more about his research in general. I didn't even like mention having like asking for like a research internship. And yeah, and I emailed like I think 4 or 5 professors at Princeton this way. And I think one of them responded to me. And so we decided to schedule a call. We had like a 30-minute discussion, which is quite a bit of time given how busy professors are, which I'm extremely grateful for. And then I just asked him about his research. I asked him about the environment in his lab. I just asked him like a bunch of questions that I wanted to know the answers to, and that I sort of knew he would find, appealing as well to answer. Because again, professors love to talk about the research because that is their job. And they love to, explain it to other people. And because they're super, super passionate about it. And so they love like talking about it and just telling you about it. Anyway, so yeah, I asked him like a bunch of questions about his research. And while I was doing that, I sort of dropped hints that I was just interested in the topic. And I think at the end, I just asked him, oh, do you have like any high schoolers or undergrads working in your lab? And so this wasn't the professor that I got the internship with, but like that's just an example of how you could approach it. Again, even during the first conversation, don't ask if you can work in the lab, because that comes as a little bit too forward. Just slowly build up the relationship bit by bit, always indicating just how interested you are in their work. And I feel like eventually you will be able to build relationships with at least a few professors. And if you start by cold emailing a lot of them and actually follow this, then I feel like there's a pretty decent chance, or at least the chance isn't like 0%, that you'll be able to get an internship. And about presenting my work. So the idea, what I did was colleges often have space for research abstracts or research papers. I did have a paper, so I had to put an abstract in. And so essentially I was working with a grad student during my internship. And so I asked him for help writing my abstract. So together I sat down, I wrote it, I sent it to him, he gave me feedback, and then I rewrote it. So essentially what I did was I talked about the topic that I was researching. I talked about why it was important and what work had been done in the past, like very briefly. And then I spoke about sort of my methodology, which was, using computer simulations and a bunch of math or whatever. And then I talked about interesting results. And I feel like that's usually the format of like normal abstracts, but I edited a little bit to show sort of my own initiative and what exactly I've done. And so, yeah, that's how I presented it.
Okay, so the next question is about the admission cycles. When did you apply to colleges, and do you think one is better than the other?
So I applied in the early admission cycle and the regular one. I applied to 2 colleges in the early admission cycle, Princeton and UMichigan. And the reason I did that is I would have applied to more, but because Princeton has a policy called single choice early action, that means you can only apply to Princeton out of all the private universities in the US. You can't apply to any other private university in the US early action if you apply to Princeton. If you apply to Princeton, Harvard, Yale, or Stanford early action, which is why that kind of restricted my other options. And I got deferred from both of them. I eventually got accepted by UMich and rejected by Princeton. But yeah, so I got deferred by both of them. And I feel like that's the reason that I ended up applying to so many schools, because getting deferred by all my colleges in early action really, it causes a lot of tension. And so, yeah, that basically, stressed me out a lot. It made me apply to way more schools than I should have. And so therefore, I feel like applying to like a good number of schools in early action is a great idea, because like you can feel like safe that you've gotten into something, at least like something that you like. And that'll really help you in your next applications in order to like be calm and not just be overly stressed while writing those. And in addition, yeah, and then I applied to like all my other schools in regular, and UC schools was in like the UC application cycle, which is completely different. And so is there anything better about one of them? I don't think so explicitly, especially in terms of admissions chances. Like at, at most schools that, like, for example, I know at like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, for example, these schools have no difference between early action and regular decision. But at some schools, like, I'm not sure, like Carnegie Mellon, for example, they have early decision. And early decision definitely increases your chances because, when you're doing early decision, as all of you probably know, like you commit to attending the school if you're accepted. And that commitment definitely increases your chances of getting in. So obviously, but again, if you can't commit to a school, like I couldn't commit to a school, like when I was applying, don't do early decision. And if you're doing early action, then early action is better in the sense that you'll be less stressed. But in terms of admissions chances, I don't think there's anything that differs between the cycles.
Okay, so the next one is a little more specific considering the admission cycles. It says, would you recommend a restrictive early action over one early decision and several early actions?
I mean, let me think. So it really depends because restrictive early action, early decision schools are completely separate. The only restrictive early action schools are, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, and Princeton, and maybe Notre Dame, which I don't know. So I think those 5 schools are restrictive early action. And so if you really, really, really like want to go to one of those 5 schools, then maybe I'd recommend restrictive early action. However, like it really messes up it at least to a large extent, it messes up your early action cycle, unless you have a lot of state schools you want to apply to. Because again, when you're applying restrictive early action, you can apply to as many state schools early action as you want. Unless you're applying, yeah, you can do that. And so if you have a lot of private schools that you want to apply to that have an early action program, then I'd caution against doing restrictive early action. Because again, if you don't get into that school, which again, statistically, like it's very hard to get in, especially in early action, because what those schools do for Indian applicants especially is they defer a lot of people because they don't know they don't know which applicants they're going to get in RD. So like it's much harder to get in early action. Like you'll still like get in, like if you're going to get in, but like you won't get in the early action round. And so although some people do get in. So I feel like, yeah, like I would recommend it if you're really set on one of those schools. But if not, just apply to them already. And about early decision. So do early decision if you really want to go to the school that you're applying early decision to. Otherwise, just don't do any early decisions either. Because if you're doing early decision, again, you have to commit. And if you're not fully set on the school, then I guess you won't want to commit. Although again, it's a balancing act because early decision does increase your chances. So I can't really advise you without knowing like your specific case, but that's general advice.
All right, so the next question we have is about what you plan to do after your undergraduation.
I don't know what I'm going to do after undergrad. I mean, I feel like that's another point that I could include in like, in a why Harvard. Because, a school like Harvard, like there are a lot of schools in the US like this, but it's like, the foundation is in liberal arts education. And the foundation of that is letting you experience different fields and decide for yourself what you want to study. For example, if I go to UC Berkeley and I'm in physics and I want to transfer to computer science in the engineering school, I cannot do that because they don't allow internal transfers to engineering and computer science, or even like they rarely do it to the engineering school. But if suddenly I wake up one day at Harvard, like before obviously like sophomore year fall, but like suddenly I wake up and I'm like, I want to do engineering, then Harvard will let me like do engineering because it's not in a separate school. So you can genuinely like transfer, you can take any courses you want, you can do whatever major you want. And this is the exact same at a school like Yale or Stanford or Princeton or Brown or like just a bunch of other schools. And I feel like that is especially like that is like an especially useful aspect And because of that, I think right now I'm just exploring my options. I am taking, math classes, physics classes, political science classes, but, I don't know what I want to do. So let's see.
Okay, so what would you recommend to students studying in boarding schools to boost their application, as the opportunities are very limited?
For students studying in boarding schools, the in-person opportunities might be very limited, but I feel like virtually there are a lot of things you can do. For example, there's research you can do that, you would be in wherever you are, and then you'd be collaborating with the professor or the lab or whoever virtually. So that is always one opportunity you can take up. In addition, like if we go to my extracurriculars, it's hard to do like Mun and debate virtually if you're in a boarding school and they don't do Mun and debate. But obviously you can try to convince your school to, to let you go or to let you form a Mun team or to conferences. Student council, you can, I'm pretty sure most schools have student councils. Robotics, again, you have to be able, the point is to be able to convince your school to let you do robotics. Like it's hard to have like a better answer than that, but that's basically it, because you can't really do those things virtually. But you can definitely do something like CFRC, where I studied multivariable calculus and linear algebra. You can study whatever you want, and you can either do it, with a mentor, or you can do it independently, but you can do it virtually, because so many schools have opportunities for that. There are so many amazing textbooks available, so you can always learn more, which is definitely something that if you can showcase that on your application, colleges will love. And yeah, a lot of schools also offer like, opportunities for you to take virtual classes there. There's edX and Coursera, which are amazing tools and which you can definitely include on your application if you've taken like, high level edX courses in math. Then you can say, oh, I've done that. And that's easy to do for that. You can do that from boarding school. Then a camp like Awesome Math, again, it's kind of, I feel like if you're not in boarding in the summer and you are, you're allowed to attend these types of camps, then definitely try to do so, because they definitely help you understand what like your field is like, and you don't have to do them through the school year. Then science popularization. If you want to do it like in your community, then obviously the boarding school is somewhere, and you'll have like a community of people who have some needs and who have some desires. If you can find ways to serve that community in ways that interest you, then that always works, and that's always cool. And then like the writing competitions, the one writing competition I've done, I've done like a few more within my school, but like the one I've done that was like competitive was, completely virtual. Anyone can enter. So like, and hackathons, like there are so many hackathons that are virtual. There are so many, coding competitions if you're interested in that. My overall point being, there are so many things you can do that are virtual, and there are so many activities that are normally in person, but you can definitely turn them into virtual activities. And I think that that is super helpful. Although again, yeah, it is a tough situation, but I guess you have to make the best of it by using the resources you have.
Okay, so in the STEM field, how would you compare Harvard to top colleges in India?
Um, I'm I'm not sure like how to compare. I feel like the education system at Harvard is very different, at least from what I've heard from people who've gone to IIT. Because I don't know much about IISc because I don't know people who've gone there. But I feel like at Harvard you have a lot more freedom to choose your courses and your major once you're here. For example, I'm taking like I was allowed to pick like between like 8 different math courses. And if I want, I could, I can take physics, I can take bio, I can take chem, whatever. And I feel like that freedom is really what differentiates like colleges in the US from colleges in India. In terms of specific quality of instruction, I've not attended IIT and I've barely attended a semester at Harvard. So I am not really sure how they compare in terms of that. And also in terms of research opportunities, I'm not 100% sure. But from what I've seen, it feels like Harvard like gives students slightly more freedom to pursue the research opportunities that they want. But yeah, I feel like the biggest difference is that here you have a lot more freedom in choosing, your classes and major.
All right, so the next one is regarding your guitar extracurricular. It says, how far did you go with guitar in terms of grades and which board did you follow?
Oh, I didn't do any of that. I just played guitar for fun. Like I played it like a decent amount, but I never pursued it like formally. So all I wrote in my guitar, like that's why guitar was my 10th extracurricular of the common. Like if I had 10 others, I wouldn't have put guitar. But I feel like guitar has always been like a way for me to relax and a way for me to, just if I'm really stressed, it's just I like playing. And that's what I wrote about. Again, I didn't try to like, and I didn't like, if you want to do like charity and stuff, that's amazing. Like I maybe should have done it, but for me, that's not what guitar meant. And that's why I didn't do that and I didn't write about that. And so, yeah, although I did play on in like a small event like once or twice. So I wrote about that as well.
Okay, so the next one is about how students in not so well-established schools with little to no curriculars or co-curriculars or clubs can do to compete with other applicants from all around the country, and also to what extent do edX and Coursera courses add to your application?
Okay, so students from not well-established schools, you guys, well, it's a challenge, but it's not that bad because admissions officers often look at so usually what your counselor does when you're applying is they send sort of a school report detailing sort of the opportunities at your school, things like that. So admissions officers often take that into account when they're evaluating your application. Like I feel like this happens, it obviously has less of an effect in like India because obviously it's like one admissions officer for the whole of India, which is pretty insane, and they don't have the time to evaluate like every single school. But I feel like they do have like some preference for smaller schools because they know you have like less opportunities, so they'll take that into account. But also again, if you can actually if you're in a less established school, an amazing thing to do would be to try and start programs. If you say you're the founder of the MUN club and that you're very good at MUN, that counts for a lot more than someone from an established school who already has a MUN club and who's good at MUN. Because like saying that you founded things and taken initiative is something that's very easy to do at a smaller school. At least it's a lot easier to do than at a bigger school. And I feel like while you don't have any established opportunities or many established opportunities, it's much easier to create opportunities and found things and start things and affect your campus life. And that is how you can pitch yourself to colleges. And in addition, looking at Coursera and edX, I'm not 100% sure, but it definitely shows interest. Learning things in general shows interest. If you've learned like a bunch of math by yourself using textbooks, that shows like interest in math. And so similarly, Coursera and edX do as well. There isn't like a specific weightage. It's just based on like, how you paint a picture of everything you've done and use Coursera and edX in that picture.
Okay, great. So the next one is about you being a US citizen and if you did see yourself at an advantage over other international students.
So I think the way admissions work, at least as far as I know, is that they look at it by region. So they compare everyone in a specific region to everyone else in that region, regardless of your citizenship. So the idea is that even if you're a US citizen, it doesn't put you at an advantage at all because they're just comparing everyone in India to everyone else in India. And the colleges obviously want the best applicants. So they're not going to put people who have like a US citizenship, especially when you're considering like people who live in India, at like a huge advantage. I don't know if there's even a small advantage, and I don't think there is. However, like this doesn't apply to Harvard because Harvard is need blind for internationals, and so are I think like Princeton, Stanford, Yale, and MIT. But the idea is that a lot of schools are need aware for internationals, but need blind for US citizens. So that I feel like puts US citizens at a slight advantage, because if they need financial aid, they can ask for it much more freely, and they can. So the idea is if you're an international and you're asking for financial aid, if the school's financial aid funds have dried up before you're able to, before like they admit you, then they won't admit you, because simply because they're need aware and you're asking for money. But if you're a US citizen, a lot of schools are need blind for US citizens. So even if you need money, they'll still, like, it won't weigh against you in your application process. So I think in that way, US citizens are at an advantage, but I don't think it's like, I don't think they're at a huge advantage in any other way.
Okay, so are national level awards and accolades necessary for someone to get into these top tier universities?
No, no. I don't think national level awards are necessary. Having a national level award never hurts. But again, the question is like, the question to ask yourself is, why do colleges like national level awards? And the reason is, at least the reason I think it is because a national level award shows that you've A, committed to what you're doing, and B, you are good at it, and C, are passionate about it. Because if you're not passionate, good, or committed, you're not going to win a national level award. And the idea is that colleges want people who are passionate, who excel, and who are committed, because like that's a person who's going to succeed. And so national level awards can help prove that, but they're not the only way to prove that. If you're doing other things that help show colleges that you're passionate about things, that you're good at them, and that you're committed to them like full time, then the college is going to value that like almost as much as a national level award. So it's just about demonstrating those specific qualities within yourself rather than specifically having like a national level award.
Okay, great. Do you think it's a good idea to put in textbooks or non-fiction novels used to self-learn in the additional information along with online courses to reflect curiosity of a student, or do you think that's too petty?
Maybe not non-fiction novels. I feel like non-fiction novels is stretching a little bit. But for example, if you've gone through like a college level textbook in math, then that's a pretty interesting thing to put in. Make sure that you've actually gone to the college, make sure that you've actually gone to the textbook, because they might ask you about it in your interview, things like that. But like, don't, like, never lie. Like, if anything, do not lie. But if you've actually gone through like a full college level textbook in like group theory, for example, that's not a terrible thing to put in there. I mean, given that there's no verification, I don't know how much weightage they'll put on it, but like it won't hurt you. And it's definitely not a petty thing to do if it's like, you know, a good hefty textbook. Novels, maybe like that would be a little bit odd.
All right, so you mentioned something about switching majors at UC Berkeley. If you could just clarify about what exactly you said and how that would affect students.
Yeah. So I mean, it won't affect most students. Like if you go to UC Berkeley is an absolutely amazing school. I feel like I would have absolutely loved to go to UC Berkeley. But the thing is that if you want to switch between sciences or like so UC Berkeley is divided into, I think, like 4 or 5 colleges, like the College of Arts and Sciences or Letters and Sciences, the College of Engineering, the College of Chemistry, and some other stuff. So the idea is that while it's very easy to transfer between majors within the College of Letters and Sciences, it's hard to transfer from the College of Letters and Sciences to the College of Engineering, simply because at UC Berkeley, engineering is that much more competitive. So suppose I went into Berkeley as a physics major, and then like 1 semester down the line, I'm like, oh, I hate physics. I want to do like electrical engineering and computer science, which is EECS. And that's Berkeley's most competitive major. There's almost no way that I can transfer into EECS. Whereas over here, or like at MIT or Caltech, usually like, you know, this usually happens with the private schools. Although some private schools, like you can't, like it's hard to do this. Like at MIT or Caltech or like Harvard, there aren't like these strict divisions. So if I want to transfer to electrical engineering at Harvard, I literally just take electrical engineering courses, and that's how I transfer. Whereas at Berkeley or like some other schools, you have to literally apply to the engineering college. And yeah, so I feel like it isn't like a huge deal if you don't want to transfer into engineering, or like you don't want to transfer into a different college, but it's definitely something you should be aware of.
Okay, as an international student, does applying for financial aid weigh your application down?
Again, like it's kind of unfortunate, but it does if the college is not need blind for internationals. Like you should look up all your college's policies. If your college says need aware for internationals, then yes, like unless you're a US citizen. But yeah, if your college says need aware for internationals, then they will count financial aid while applying. But that doesn't mean you won't get in. It just means that you're slightly less likely to. And like if there's a similar candidate who's not applying for financial aid or who's a US citizen and the colleges need blind for US citizens, then then the candidate will might get in over you simply because you applied for financial aid. It's not a great situation, but like that's how it is. But make sure you do your research and talk to people more qualified than me to answer this question before you like make decisions about applying.
Okay, so the next one asks for which universities you applied to and got into, and also which colleges you got interviews with.
I mean, so usually interviews aren't competitive to get. Like for example, Stanford interviews absolutely everyone. The only competitive interview that I got was the only college that I applied to that had a competitive interview was Harvard. And so yeah, I got an interview with Harvard, and then everything else, like I got interviews with schools like I had interviews with like Harvey Mudd. I had interviews with let's think UPenn, and I made like a video for Brown in lieu of an interview, things like that. But like getting those interviews aren't competitive. So like if you don't get an interview for most schools, don't fret. And what was I gonna say? Yeah, but I applied to like a bunch of schools. I mean, if you want, like at the like I guess after all the questions, I can pull up my college list and share that screen. But like I just applied to too many.
Okay, so what kind of questions were you asked in these interviews?
I was mostly asked like questions about my interests and why I'm doing like interesting things, like what things I'm doing. So for example, one of my like my I'll talk about my Harvard interview. So my Harvard interviewer asked me about my background, about where I'm from, like what I'm doing, like, and then she asked me what I'm interested in, like academics wise and extracurricular wise. And then it was just questions around that. There was no like, at least in my Harvard interview, there was no like trick question or like, philosophical like argument that you had to make. Although I've heard from friends from like other colleges that there may or may not be questions like that. But yeah, it was mostly like general, just about me. It was to get to know me better. And overall, it was, yeah, that was basically it. And in addition, though, I had to, explain a few things like properly. Like my interviewer, for example, didn't know what Model UN is. So I took like 5 minutes and explained in detail what Model UN was to her. And I feel like it was things like that that were slightly more interesting questions because like rather than simply asking about my interests, they actually asked me to explain something in detail. So yeah, it was mostly like if you like you don't have to like prepare for most interviews unless like they specifically tell you to, because it'll mostly be about you.
Okay, do all colleges in the US have an interview before they send you acceptance letters?
No, not at all. Like most colleges I got into did not interview me.
All right, does an application have a setback when the major remains undecided?
I mean, for some colleges, maybe, because for some colleges, undecided major means that you're open to, going like some colleges, undecided major means that if once you get into the college, you can go into any of their schools or any of their majors. And some colleges, if some of the majors are more competitive than others, an undecided major might be that you're angling for those majors. And you're basically like, I don't know, you're trying to get it. So that would like negatively affect you. But I feel like the main problem with undecided majors is that it's harder to tell a story. Again, like look at painting a picture. I told colleges I want to major in physics or like the physical sciences. And then I proceeded to show them everything I'd done in the physical sciences. If you're undecided, it's still possible, but it's hard to tell colleges exactly what your story is. It's hard to tell them like what you're interested in. And so, yeah, it's not a bad thing specifically. If you can still tell a story, then it's awesome. And yeah, but like it's harder to tell a story.
All right, Arpit, I think that's all we have from the question section.
Mhm.
One of our viewer has asked for your contact so they could email you later. If you can send that over to Inflow, we can forward that with our participants, but we do not have any more questions in the chat box.
Okay, that's awesome.
Okay.
Anyways, yeah, thanks guys for attending. It's been fun, and I hope I helped you at least a little bit in your application process.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, everyone, and thank you, Arpit, for taking time out for all of us and giving us a really insightful talk. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's been great. Okay.